never slow up. No, I don't take shit, I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
The story of Channel NRS Mastermind is a long, complex, and exciting story called Mastermind, which is told in 7 weekly episodes. This story was serialized in 7 parts by Evan Ratliff in the online magazine Atavist, starting in March 2016, just a few months ago. The story is still hot, and the narrative continues. We saw that for years he managed a very successful online drug sales business whose customers and suppliers were in America. He was adopted by a family other than his biological family and grew up with them. Gold smuggling, drug dealing, and logging of rare trees in Africa, and very strange and seemingly unrelated real estate deals and businesses. Many of them were in Africa, but some were in other parts of the world. He had armed a tribe there with weapons he himself smuggled from Asia, creating an army there. We saw how they worked on this case for years and how they meticulously followed Le Roux' trail. After years, they were able to figure out who was behind this and how this drug trafficking organization was operating. He is a military man, a soldier with an extensive military background, raised in the American Army in fact, but then he went towards extremely serious crimes. He is from Kentucky, USA, and is one of the few Americans who worked at a high level in Paul Le Roux' organization. The organization, as we said, is full of Israelis, South Africans, and Britons. Its Americans are very few. Hunter enlisted in the Army in 1983 and 2 years later became a Ranger. In 1986, one of his friends in their unit was killed in a training exercise, and Hunter was very traumatized by this. He was very affected by this event, and then he left the Ranger group, the Ranger team, with a medical certificate. For the next 21 years he remained in the Army, mostly as a shooting instructor and doing training work. He had assignments in Germany, Panama, and Puerto Rico. Then, as a training officer, someone who performs non-operational tasks, he advanced greatly in that unit, reaching the top level of that work. He says, for example, that he did security work for doctors and nurses and such things that are in the Army, and he also had achievements there. He received medals, the National Defense Service Medal, and for example, the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. In his home state of Kentucky, he was given the title of Kentucky Colonel, a very honorable title given to those residents of the state who make sacrifices for their family, comrades, country, and faith. This is the man accused of planning the murder of Catherine Lee, a Filipino real estate broker, and even boasted about it later, as we heard, saying that those who carried out the job were very clumsy, very sloppy. One of Le Roux' former employees says that he was very ruthless. He chose the nickname Rambo for himself, and it suited him very well. When we look at his photos, it's exactly what we expect from a person with these characteristics. A large build, a powerful physique, and a very penetrating gaze. He had a reputation for himself as a professional assassin in their world, but his story is more interesting than just being a professional assassin. Then they found bigger things and surprised themselves. One very interesting thing that one of them told the article's author was that if Paul Le Roux had started hiding his identity and working in the dark, a little and only a little earlier, there would probably never have been any way to reach him. Many say his plan was to attack from there, take over the Maldives, and bring back a former president of the Maldives to power, essentially making him his puppet. And the American police devised together, and Paul executed it to trap the people who once worked for him. Joseph Hunter is probably the strangest and most mysterious person among all of Paul Le Roux' employees. If you remember, he is also the person with whom we started the story. Evan Ratliff, the author of this Mastermind report, was first drawn to Hunter and Hunter's case. Then, gradually, he realized that the story was bigger than that and that there was a Paul Le Roux, and he was drawn into this, just like Paul Le Roux himself. He wanted to turn that place into a safe haven from which he could manage all his businesses around the world without interference. These things seem more Hollywood than Hollywood itself, but many of them are real. We also heard a little about where he recruited the people for his organization, where he got the administrative people, and where he got the operational people. The type of people he hired for operational work were mostly people with military backgrounds from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, especially since security contractors opened the way to the region, bringing many forces to this part of the world. And these forces later came to Paul Le Roux's aid to strengthen his organization around the world. They went to South Africa. He separated from his family very early in his adolescence. We saw how in the months after the seizure of that ship, which was carrying weapons and was confiscated by the Philippine police, important people in that case disappeared one by one. We also saw that their disappearance was almost simultaneous with Paul Le Roux's gradual disappearance. He realized his work was in trouble, became less and less visible, and finally went into hiding. Later, we saw that he disappeared from the Philippines and very soon reappeared in Brazil with a very calculated plan to be safe from the American police forever. He made a miscalculation that led to the police getting their hands on him. And finally, the American police, with the help of the Brazilians, set a trap for him in Africa and Liberia and transferred him to New York very soon. Le Roux offered, "I am willing to cooperate with you so you can catch the important people in my organization." He became obsessed with computers, coding, and such things, and had such a life. We saw that he had several different marriages, marrying people of different nationalities. We saw that he was a very calculating person, working very systematically. But people were working for him in many different countries in various hideouts, and he was accumulating a lot of money. Then we saw that before Le Roux started this work, he was a relatively well-known person in the field of internet encryption. He wrote a very important software called E4M, which later became the basis for another software called TrueCrypt, a software for encrypting information, communications, hard drives, and the same software that Snowden suggested to journalists to use. He probably used it himself, and in one of his speeches, he announced that agencies had tried for years to penetrate it and failed. Introduce Channel NARRA to anyone you think would enjoy hearing new and true stories. If you haven't heard the previous episodes of the Mastermind story, we suggest you start there and then come to this part. First, we'll review what we heard in the previous 2 episodes, and then we'll move on to today's story. The Mastermind story began in the Philippines, where 2 Filipino women had been killed, and the police were very confused about what had happened to them and who had killed them. Then we saw that the U.S. Drug Enforcement Police arrested a former American soldier and a professional international assassin named Joseph Hunter in Phuket, Thailand. We heard how this person was probably connected to the murder of those 2 people. Gradually, we realized that Hunter himself works for another person named Paul Le Roux, who is the mastermind of our story. He is the brains behind this operation, a person who is currently in U.S. police custody and is cooperating with them. He helped them capture Hunter and many other people who worked in his organization. Then we went back to see where Paul Le Roux came from and how he started. We saw for ourselves where Paul came from. He was born and raised in Zimbabwe. Generally, the interesting thing we saw was that in a way that is not very clear to us, Le Roux gradually got involved in arms dealing. We also became familiar with the story of the MV Avak, or Avak, which was actually the beginning of the end of Paul Le Roux's empire. We heard about a strange plan Le Roux had in Somalia at one point. One of the most important things we heard in the 5th episode was that we became familiar with the deep police investigation process. Now, in this 6th episode, the second to last episode, we hear about the sting operation, a plan that Paul. The things they say and write about Hunter here and there are also extraordinarily amazing. Hunter, 47 years old, as we said, had a military background. In 2004, he left the army and returned to his small hometown of 5,000 people with his wife, 2 sons, and 2 dogs. His mother and sister also lived nearby, and it seemed very natural for him to become a police officer. He took the entrance exam for the New York City Police Department and passed. But then he concluded that New York was too expensive for him to live there. Lolo, Paul Le Roux' relative, who told Evan Ratliff, the author, much of what we know, also told him that in one of Hunter's first assignments, he saw him. They would collect it there and then sell it in the legal gold market. One story they tell is that one of Paul Le Roux' men, named Shea Rooney, was once going to one of these African countries to buy gold. But when he returned for the second time, the empire's downfall had actually begun some time ago. A big project where we have to work with a group we'll just call South American Partners. Tan Lim, a 50-something Chinese man who worked and had a business in Hong Kong and was involved in illegal activities. He had bought crystal meth from him. Now Le Roux wanted to source the material from somewhere again. Another person Le Roux contacted was a man named Peralta, a 37-year-old Filipino who had previously worked as the manager of a bar that Paul Le Roux owned in Manila, Philippines. His encounter with Le Roux' organization is a very coincidental and strange story. David Smith once saw this man in the coastal city outside Subic. At that time, this man was the manager of a bar called Blue Rock Resort. Then Smith brought him in and said, "Come work in our bar in Manila," and he came. In a very, very strange and rare coincidence, Ratliff later realized that at the same time he was running that bar. The security chief of this bar was a man whose story we had heard before, John Nash, a man who is currently in Philippine police custody. They don't know his real name, nor do they know his nationality, and he had been living for years with a dead man's passport, and he is involved in several murder cases, all related to Le Roux' organization. In short, they were in the same bar at the same time. This one was the manager and that one was the security chief, but it is highly unlikely that this is related to them later becoming colleagues in Le Roux'ization in some way. Le Roux told Hunter to put together a team of people with military backgrounds who are trustworthy and skilled. We even have technical work, expert work. When he said this, Hunter knew exactly what kind of work he was referring to. At the same time, Le Roux was contacting other people from his former and current employees around the world. One of them was a man named Scott Stammers, a 43-year-old bald British man with a goatee. He also did drug and weapon-related work for Le Roux in the Philippines, and his main specialty was finding whatever Le Roux wanted: heavy weapons, crystal meth, chemicals, and expert people to cook meth and such things. Le Roux told him, "I want to create a team for my new South American partners, and we need to deliver crystal meth to them." The deal we heard about a little in the previous episode was that they were supposed to have a bartering deal of crystal meth and cocaine. They would give 6 kilos of crystal meth and get 6 kilos of cocaine. We said that the drug soma had been declared a controlled substance and a large part of the business had been lost. Le Roux was sinking deeper and deeper into the quagmire of illegal activities to compensate for the profit he had lost from elsewhere. He had become more violent, always worried. Hunter himself, in a wiretapped conversation, told one of his men that in the year he joined, "We killed 9 people." It is possible, of course, that there is an exaggeration in this number, but in the region, based on what we described in the previous episode about the people who disappeared one after another in the Philippines, the number 9 doesn't seem too far-fetched. As the number of victims increased, Paul Le Roux gradually went underground. September 2012 was when he had completely disappeared. He had a huge amount of money with him, and it was stolen from him. Lolo himself says that it's very natural. You can't go to Congo with a briefcase full of cash and expect nothing to happen. Hunter was actually hired to prevent such incidents from happening again. Lolo says that Hunter seemed very professional. He was one of those who wanted to quickly come, do the job he was supposed to do, and quickly leave without wasting time or doing suspicious and useless things. He says that later when he saw him in Hong Kong and also in Manila, Philippines, he was a quiet person, didn't talk much, didn't make eye contact. Then he says he wasn't a coward, but his presence was intimidating. Sitting in front of him was uncomfortable for a person. Several of Le Roux' employees lost about $1 million that they had brought to Africa for a gold deal. Whether they lost it or stole it or whatever, Le Roux sent Hunter to Zambia to find them and retrieve the money by any means necessary, and he returned empty-handed from that mission. Hunter himself later says, "I myself was a victim of Paul Le Roux' anger and behavior. Once, I went to Mali for a month for a gold deal. There was a mess there, and money was lost, and he threatened to kill me. Instead, he went to work at a prison called Green River Correctional Complex, about an hour's drive from his home. This coincided with the peak of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars and the peak of the hot market for security contracting companies, with good salaries. He says that Hunter was an unpredictable and dangerous person. We did several missions together, and then I decided that I no longer wanted to work with him. I didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore. He was a scary person and a person who was always very, very angry. It seemed like he wasn't mentally stable." Gill also says that Dave Smith, the person who was previously the head of Le Roux' security organization and his right-hand man, once fired Hunter because he said that he was too hot-headed. In 2010, Hunter was thrown out of the organization and returned to Kentucky. But a little later, when Paul Le Roux found out that David Smith was stealing some money, as we heard in the previous episode, he eliminated David Smith and then rehired Hunter. In one of the conversations, Hunter himself says, "Yes, Dave lost his life because he was stealing money from the boss, and then the boss gave his job to me." Later, Hunter always told the people he hired that if you steal from the boss, don't doubt that you will be killed. Then he would tell them, "Everyone says, no, I'll steal a little and then go hide. I'm not afraid. But don't make a mistake. If they don't get you, they'll get your servants, they'll get your children, they'll get your mother, they'll get your father." The people he is referring to here are practically himself and his men, and he is also telling the others, "We will get them. We will do this." Going to the front lines to do operational work had all the excitement, which showed that our coolie had satellite companies here and there, and the company's name has recently become well known. Hunter, who was tired of living in the city, got up and signed a contract with a company that had a very good relationship with the U.S. Army. After a period of probation and preliminary training, the tasks they gave him included, for example, protecting the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad or investigating suicide bombers in Iraq, and such things. The company he worked for at that time recently had its name mentioned in the leaked Panama Papers. His return to action, to the battlefield, caused the personality traits he had during his military service, being nervous, irritable, quick to anger, to all return. He couldn't sleep properly. His family complained that he was acting out. In 2007, another old soldier introduced Hunter to Paul Le Roux, saying, "Hey, go see this guy. He's a wealthy man from South Africa, a businessman, and he's looking for people to do security work." Hunter was also looking to get out of the war because he thought all these nervous breakdowns and emotional problems were due to the war. The deal was that they would buy gold at a low price from small-scale miners and smuggle it out of the country, out of Mali. He joined Le Roux' organization and very soon was traveling with him from one place to another, from Mali to Hong Kong to Brazil. He also had 2 fake passports, one from Zimbabwe and one from South Africa, which he used for these trips. All of Le Roux' employees who saw Hunter were impressed by him. Now, what was the deal? Another of Le Roux' employees who left the organization and gave a lot of information to Evan Ratliff was Gill. When Hunter joined the organization, it was the peak of Paul Le Roux's organization's expansion and growth. Then, in late 2012, Hunter again received encrypted emails from Paul saying, "Yes, there's a new project in the works." Stammers had previously bought a significant shipment of crystal meth from a Chinese man named Yi Shong. He had bought crystal meth from him. Now Le Roux wanted to source the material from somewhere again. Another person Le Roux contacted was a man named Peralta, a 37-year-old Filipino who had previously worked as the manager of a bar that Paul Le Roux owned in Manila, Philippines. His encounter with Le Roux's organization is a very coincidental and strange story. Has destroyed all these laboratories, burned them all down, but we still have several tons of pure, high-grade material from before. Those he liked and thought were the best, he sent to Paul Le Roux for approval, who left the army in 2010. For a while he was here and there, working in a bakery, doing manual labor and such things. In an email to Paul Le Roux, he said, "Especially these two, Sawersky and Google, are very skilled people who will do a lot for us." There, he met Le Roux's South American contacts in one of Le Roux's houses there. A little later, Google, Sawersky, and Falter arrived there for their first face-to-face meeting. Hunter had also told them to dress like tourists, not to wear clothes that would make it obvious they were military, and so on. Then he had sent them money to buy tickets and come there. When everyone gathered, Hunter told them that the clients they were going to work for were two people from a Colombian cartel. They are the boss's lovers, and they said to be ready. You are going to see a lot of money, you are going to see a lot of cocaine, you are going to see a lot of gold. Prepare yourselves for it. The work they had to do for them was debt collection. Some people owe them money and haven't paid them. We have to go and get the gold from them. There was also a cocaine smuggling operation and some bonus work, which we know in their terminology means assassination. Then he tells them that when they give you a job, that job must become sacred to you. The mission you are given must be carried out at any cost. The emails they exchanged are also interesting. For example, in the emails exchanged between Hunter, he says, "Our work is like working in the military, like working in the army. You see James Bond in a movie and you say, I can do that too. I wish I had a chance to do that. Now is your chance. All these things you once thought you might be able to do if an action came up, now is the time." Then he says, "If you have worked for the government or in the military, you know they tell you that if you get into trouble, we know nothing, it's just you. We don't even know you. It's the same here. The system is no different. It's like being in the military. The only difference is that instead of working for your commander, you are working for us and for our Colombian clients. This is also a war. If they catch you, they will kill you unless you surrender. If they allow you to surrender, it's a war. If you get caught, you get killed. That's the long and short of it." And Google wrote somewhere, "Yes, I completely understand what ninja means. I am ready for anything." They clearly know what they are talking about. Then he also writes, "Hope to see you soon. I am ready to give my all." Hunter replies to him, "I told the client that you are my number one. Don't disappoint me." Google again says, "I am ready with all my might." As he says, he was always looking for suitable work. He also has two small twin daughters. In early 2013, Google called Falter and said, "I know someone who is putting together a security team, and this offer is very attractive to him, both financially and because the work is meaningful and he enjoys it." The third person is a Pole who was previously a police officer named Sławomir Sawersky. He has 15 years of experience, having worked in both the army and the police, and says, "I was in George Bush's security team and in Pope John Paul II's security team when he came to Poland." He is also one of those who later became disillusioned and went into security contracting work, but he eventually faced financial problems. And in February 2013, one of his friends introduced him to Hunter. The email he sent as a job application was a typical letter that all of us write for work. He wrote, "Yes, I know that my commitment, my experience, and my professionalism, all of which my references can confirm, will lead to success for your company and mutual satisfaction for both of us, and such things." In his resume, he also listed some specialties: shooting, parachuting, hand-to-hand combat, and such things. Finally, they agreed on 3 people who were good. One of them was a man named Dennis Google, a 37-year-old German with a military background who grew up in northern Germany. He had a difficult childhood. His mother died when he was a child, and his father abandoned him. His grandmother raised him. He says, for example, "I joined the army to take control of my life." He joined a group in the German army that is similar to the German army's Rangers. For example, one of the missions he went on with this unit was a peacekeeping mission in Kosovo in 2010. When he left the army, he also went to private security companies. First, he went to Afghanistan and then to Africa, working on ships and boats that patrol the sea to protect ships from piracy. Hunter contacted him and said, "We are forming a highly specialized, high-level security group to provide services to some of our very high-level clients to provide security services." This guy says that when he joined Hunter's team, Hunter took him under his wing and supported him, and a deep relationship formed between them. I looked up to him as a role model, as a guide, but also as the father I never had in my life. And we are the only laboratory in North Korea that is still operational and working. These guys say, "We want to go and visit the laboratory." He says, "No, that's not possible. Taking someone who doesn't speak North Korean there is very suspicious, and we can't do that." They send him the tracking number, the waybill number, and email it to Paul Le Roux. They receive the sample, test it, and say one is 96% pure and the other is 98% pure. Everything is okay. David Smith once saw this man in the coastal city outside Subic. At that time, this man was the manager of a bar called Blue Rock Resort. Then Smith brought him in and said, "Come work in our bar in Manila," and he came. In a very, very strange and rare coincidence, Ratliff later realized that at the same time he was running that bar, the security chief of this bar was a man whose story we had heard before. John Nash, a man who is currently in Philippine police custody. They don't know his real name, nor do they know his nationality. And he had been living for years with a dead man's passport. And he is involved in several murder cases, all related to Le Roux's organization. In short, they were in the same bar at the same time. This one was the manager, and that one was the security chief, but it is highly unlikely that this is related to them later, becoming colleagues in Le Roux's organization in some way. In short, Peralta started working in this bar and later got involved in other tasks, helping them with the crystal meth deal they had with the Chinese man. He actually became the middleman for that deal. Paul called him again and said, "You need to do a similar job again as an intermediary, this time with the new South American partners." At the time he contacted him, the bar was closed and Peralta had been out of work for a while. This offer seemed very good to him. He said, "Okay, I'll do it." Peralta called the Chinese man, Lim, and convinced him to meet with Le Roux's representatives. In early January, Lim and Peralta traveled to Bangkok. There, they met 2 South American men who said, "We are important people in a Colombian cartel, and we are looking for high-quality crystal meth. We will take delivery of the material in Liberia, but the plan is to sell it in New York. Of course, at first, we need a sample." Lim said, "No problem, high quality, all okay. We only get from first-hand sources, and we are sure." The first-hand sources they are talking about here are North Korea. This is a claim that cannot be verified, but it doesn't seem very strange either. There are U.S. congressional reports that, North Korea has been involved in the production and large-scale trafficking of crystal meth since the early 1990s. Reason is that heavy rains destroyed opium production there, and what replaced it was laboratory-produced drugs. In 2007, they say that North Korea was producing between 10 and 15 tons of high-quality crystal meth per year below capacity. Usually, they smuggle this across the border they have with northern China. The general belief is that this massive crystal meth production program is either supervised by the government in the dark, with underground approval, or that the government itself is involved. However, later in 2013, U.S. government reports stated that crystal meth production by the North Korean government had probably either completely ceased or significantly decreased. Lim also repeated the same thing to these Colombians, saying the North Korean government to show America that it is no longer involved in selling crystal meth. When March arrived, Hunter had been busy for several months collecting resumes from people with military backgrounds around the world to build his team. Google introduced Hunter to another soldier, a German named Falter. With this team, Hunter thought he was ready to start working. In March, Hunter went to Phuket, Thailand. Then Hunter begins his speech to them, parts of which we have already described. Then he says, "You have to use your brain in this work. Your brain must work because you never know what will happen. You never know what the next step is. You are going to collect money from someone and do the same protection work there for some very important meetings we have there." Hunter also made some calculations, for example, saying, "We need a budget of $15,000 for this work as travel expenses and driving licenses and such." We started by saying that Le Roux disappeared in September 2012. He had disappeared from the sight of his colleagues, acquaintances, and his people in mid-May. Stammers and Shekels returned to Thailand to see these Colombians and to agree on the crystal meth shipment. The Chinese dealer there tells them, "I was forced to take this stock I had from North Korea and bring it to the Philippines because it was no longer safe there. Therefore, this shipment must be transported from the Philippines to Thailand and from there to Liberia." For the part of the mission that takes place in Thailand, Stammer said, "I will bring a person named Adrian Volkovic. This is also a person with a military background who is in the French Foreign Legion and then worked in private security. He will be the field commander, and under him, 8 armed military personnel will work to protect the shipment." To start the work, the Colombians say, "Very well, you bring 6 kilos of crystal meth, and we will give you $60,000 per kilo." The other side haggles and says, "Sir, 60 is a bit low. Make it 100. They say, "Yes, we'll give you 100. Then they hold several meetings in Thailand to coordinate the details of the operation. In emails, this shipment is referred to as, for example, marine engine parts. But we know that he was arrested in Liberia, then taken to America, and began cooperating with the police. A few months later, in late 2012, he began contacting various people in his organization and started implementing several parallel plans that he had meticulously drawn up with the police. The main scenario is that new teams must be formed, a new major client has been found, a Colombian cartel. Then we smuggle a large shipment of crystal meth for them, and there are 2 people who need to be killed. For these tasks, they are recruiting people and purposefully involving various people who have previously worked with Paul in these 2 plans. One of the things common to both scenarios is that they are all designed in such a way that the crime must somehow be related to America. For example, an American police officer must be killed, or when buying drugs, everyone must know that in the end, these drugs are going to be sold in New York. This is so that these people can later be prosecuted in America and have cases built against them in America. Then, for example, we need a telephoto lens so that we can take useful pictures of people's faces from 100 meters away, of car license plates, and such things. In April of the same year, he sent the team there. The first meeting there was between the Colombians and an arms buyer named TC and two people whose names we had heard before, Scott Stammers and Philip Shekels. They are buying some weapons, RPGs, and such things. People are involved in it. We have nothing to do with the deal happening there. Google, Falter, and Sawersky went and provided security for this meeting. The next day, Stammers and Shekels had a meeting with these Colombians and two other people. This meeting was about a shipment that had recently been lost in the South Pacific Ocean. As Paul told Hunter in an email, we know he is talking about the ship Joro that we heard was lost, and it was the loss of this ship that sent Paul deeper and deeper into his hiding place. In fact, after Paul had planned for this ship to leave Ecuador, none of his colleagues saw him again. Now Stammers' mission was to find a new supplier for this lost mission, to find someone new who could replace it. Stammers said, "We can deliver between 700 and 1,000 kilos of material from South America to Australia. You are going to take someone hostage. Kidnapping, you know how to do it. It's like when football teams return, the coach points out their weaknesses and strengths." He also told them, yes, for example, you made this mistake here, you made that mistake there, and gave them some warnings. Then he prepared a presentation, a slideshow of the missions they had carried out, and sent it to Paul so Paul could see how this team worked. For example, what their output was and such things. One very interesting thing in this meeting they had there is that when Hunter is looking at their photos, he sees that there are two people here in this meeting whom he knows, and they are Stammers and Shekels. But Hunter doesn't know that they actually came to that meeting on behalf of Paul Le Roux. That is, this meeting, two sides out of these three sides of the meeting, are actually Paul Le Roux's people, but none of them know about the others' work. This is a very strange example of the high level of mission and information classification in Paul Le Roux' ICE organization. These two groups are both working for the same person in the same organization, and neither has any idea. In fact, they are pawns in a complex plan that Le Roux is executing. Only he, sitting up there, knows how everyone is doing their part of the work. Those below don't know anything special. You go to the person's door, knock on some pretext, pull them into your van. You must have already chosen a place to go and hide, a place to keep them. You just have to go straight there, and as soon as you are in the building, there's no problem. You tie their hands and feet, and I'm sure any person in that situation will give you the money. If torture is necessary, waterboarding is also not difficult. It's a very simple task. You put a wet towel on the person's face, then pour water for 15 or 20 seconds from above on their face, and then they start talking. It's not a very complicated task. Then he says, "I have explained the work to you. It's up to you to see if you are in or out. The Colombians are coming here tomorrow. If you come here tomorrow and show yourselves at this meeting, it means you are in until the end. Tomorrow the Colombians come, and they are all there, and they say, 'Yes, we are in.' And they, just as clearly and directly as Hunter, say what they want. They say that when they give you a job, you have to go to the end of it. For example, if we call you at some point and say that this person is not paying their debt, we want you to be like branch 12. Go and make the person disappear." In the first steps, these Colombians gave them some simpler tasks. For example, they said, "There's a shipment going from Thailand to China, and we want you to keep an eye on it. Monitor it to see if the Thai police are following this shipment or not." So they went to Koh Samui, an island, a port city on one of Thailand's islands. Then they took pictures of the ship, pictures of its location in the harbor. All the time, of course, Hunter himself stayed at home and was constantly communicating with Paul and the Colombians. After a few days, Hunter wrote to Paul that the people on this ship, the Colombians, are not very interesting. "I don't like them. Of course, the guys are still watching them, but it doesn't seem like the Thai police are really investigating them or following them. What we see is that nothing comes out of the ship's cabin during the day. Their captain only comes out every night, picks up a few people from another ship there, and they go partying. In short, this Koh Samui job finished. Then the Colombian said, "We want you to go to Mauritius, an island in the Indian Ocean east of Madagascar, now. We are not concerned with this meeting." This hunter team returned to Thailand, and when they returned to Thailand, they sat in a meeting with Rambo Hunter. Okay, let's review what we've said so far in this part and then move on to the rest of the story. Now let's continue these two stories: the crystal meth smuggling operation and the assassination of those two people. In 2013, Hunter suggested to Le Roux that he bring another person from elsewhere in the organization to add to his team. This person also has an interesting story. A guy named Tim Van Wake, an American, grew up in San Bernardino, California. He really wanted to be a police officer. He joined the army during the Persian Gulf War. After that, he left and went to study at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Then he returned to the military. His specialty became bomb identification, or the work itself has to be done in Africa, probably because the captain lives in Africa. Hunter replies, "My guys will do it," referring to Wanbaki and Google. Then, for clarification, he asks, "Are you talking about both people, the captain and the agent, or just the captain?" The Colombians had brought the documents and files of this D mission and the spy within the system and said, "We want you to do this job in Liberia." Then they also say, "We want the other two people, Sibursky and Filter, to be in this mission as well." This guy with Wanbaki quickly texts Hunter and says, "They're saying this, and my question is this the time for money, or do we want to increase the money?" Le Roux writes, "Both are problems, both are issues, and you need to act on both." Then he says, "For the informant Davis, $1,000. For the agent Ponst, $1,000. And for you, as the one who plans and leads the operations, $300,000. Hunter says, "Very good, we'll do both. You just need to provide the necessary tools." After leaving the military, he wanted to become a police officer in Phoenix. Because the guys don't know exactly how we're going to do this yet. Some of the things we're buying are a bit much. 2 light machine guns with suppressors, handheld light machine guns magazines for these. Weapons 2 .22 caliber light handguns again, with suppressors magazines and bullets for them. 1 .308 rifle a long range. Rifle with a scope and case and bullets. 2 Covert bulletproof vests. These are very light, very thin fiber-based vests with very high protection level and very high resistance. FBI agents use these vests under their clothes, and they provide 100% protection against most handguns and light weapons. 2 GPS devices, 2 special GPS devices, 2 masks, and 2 two-way radios with headphones and push-to-talk capability, so we don't have to dial when we want to talk to each other. It's a very comprehensive list. He went there but failed a medical test for a reason not specified in the record, a reason we don't know. The job was something they could treat like leisure time. It was clear that yes, some cocaine shipments, someone wants to give them to someone else. They just need to oversee the operation. The area is also the Bahamas, with beaches and recreation, and their organization is having fun. When the work is done, they call the Colombians and say, "It's done." They sit in the car and watch through the window as bags of cocaine are loaded onto the plane. And after the plane takes off, they call the Colombians to report on how it went. He became depressed, got divorced, and then went to work for one of these private security contracting companies. Their job is to go with trained dogs to search for explosives in Afghanistan to neutralize bombs and such things. He worked there for a while, but again, due to medical issues, he lost that job too. This time, Hunter tells Le Roux there's one condition. If you go there, you must be prepared to participate in bonus work. In an email, Hunter tells Paul, "I told him he could come here." This time, It has a plane in the Bahamas that's going to deliver Davis kilo of cocaine to America. He says this guy is giving information to the D and the Australian police. He says, yes, that guy in the Ecuadorian police was watching what happened to the gyro ship, and we realized the information came through the captain of the gyro ship. This guy was talking to the police, and in short, he's caused us trouble. This guy and a G&T. These are people we need to get rid of, and this is priority number 1 with very, very good money in it. I want a proposal from you on the best way to do this. This needs to be done as soon as possible. We've already lost 3 shipments, lost a lot of money, and we can't waste time. This guy doesn't know anyone from the organization. He only knows his own contact, so he doesn't pose a direct threat to us. But what's dangerous is that we can't keep losing shipments and actually losing money. For this mission, Hunter puts these guys in charge. This is around the same time that Le Roux tells Hunter, the Colombians and I have realized there's an antenna, a spy, in our organization, and start work by May, and then says he confirmed he's ready to do the bonus work too. At the same time in May, the Colombians say, we have another mission for you, another protection actually. On May 30th, Le Roux sends an email to Hunter about a guy named Jim Reeker, one of the people who worked for Hunter. Then he asks Hunter, do you think this is something you can handle at ultimatum, or should I give it to these South Africans? Later, in an email to Paul, he gives a list. These are the things we need to do this. Actually, a month later, this team, except for Hunter, goes to the Bahamas to do this protection and surveillance work. After the plane takes off, this American guy goes to a hotel and meets the Colombians. Now let us leave these for a bit and go to that crystal meth shipment that the guy wanted. Then he said, I've collected everything from my warehouse in North Korea, brought all the goods to the Philippines. It needs to come from the Philippines and so on. Even though they've been working together for several months, 8 months now, when they come, Hunter tells his men to thoroughly search these two on the 24th. The 2 brokers, Lim and Francie Realta, are sitting in a hotel in Phuket, waiting for the shipment to arrive. What happens is that Thai drug police officers suddenly raid and arrest all 5 people together. 10 kilometers away, in another area, other police officers raid a villa and arrest Joseph Hunter. The team that went to arrest Hunter was much larger than necessary. The D at that time said nothing about these 2 operations being related. They only said, we have discovered and neutralized an operation that shows that North Korea is still an important player in supplying crystal meth in the world and in international trafficking, and so on. It was the Washington Post that connected these 2 and said that this drug trafficking case from North Korea is related to an international cartel that worked for Joseph Hunter, a former American soldier, and then wrote that Joseph Hunter had been arrested some time ago, of course, for a crime and within a completely separate case from the crystal meth trafficking story. All these reports that come out pretend that there's no one above Hunter. He's the connecting link between these 2 cases, and he's the most important person in both stories. Hunter was the only person at home and was not armed, but they practically went with an army. They arrest him, handcuff him, bring him out, and make him sit on the ground in front of the door, and all the police officers stand behind him. The photos that later come out of these scenes and are spread all over the world show nothing legible from Hunter's face. His hands are cuffed behind his back. He's wearing a Homer Simpson t-shirt, and the image is strange, especially when you consider it alongside the news that this man was arrested while planning the assassination of a D agent. The next day, Summers, Shaquille, and Valkovic meet with the Colombians for the last time to review the details of the plan, and say that all the main players are now on the field. They are immediately transferred to one of the old prisons remaining from the Soviet era, and it seems that they were beaten so much that Sibursky later needed surgery. In another corner of the world, on the same morning, Wanbaki and Google get off their plane at Roberts International Airport in Monrovia, Liberia. They were ready to go kill another agent and that informant captain, and their expectation was that the Colombians would come to greet them with weapons, equipment, masks, the cars they needed, and motorcycles and so on. Instead, a group of Liberian police officers raided them, and very soon, the ones who were there quickly took them to New York. This is 1 year after Paul Le Roux boarded a similar plane from the same origin to the same destination. Summers also sends an email to Paul saying that all the main players are now on the field and are waiting for the work to start. They said that yes, several D agents had trained a lot, they had written a script, they had a very detailed scenario. And they introduced themselves as representatives of a Colombian cartel, and they were working with these people. We'll put up the video of this press conference so you can see it. The explanation they give seems like they really designed and executed a very extraordinary and masterful plan to arrest these people. But Evan Ratliff says, "When I watched this, something bothered me about the story, and that was, how did the D know these people? Is it that they go around the world looking for who's assassinating, who's killing, and then they approach them with a fake offer, suggest a terrorist act to them so they come for this job, and then they arrest them? It seems like the story they tell starts with Joseph Hunter, a man with this background, with this power, with this organization. But what made them interested in Hunter? How did Hunter enter the DEA's radar? Take their electronic devices and then always hold a meeting with them outdoors to ensure no one is recording anything. Then Hunter, Google, Wanbaki, and the Colombians sit down and go over the details of the plan step by step. Sabursky and Filter are not in this meeting. They've gone to Estonia. There's a job there, protecting an arms shipment. They've gone to do that. In short, they're sitting in this meeting, looking at the subject's photos, discussing how to enter the destination country, how to exit. Both are supposed to have both a car and a motorcycle. Hunter has bought them special masks that were on the equipment list he ordered from Le Roux. These are special latex masks that when you wear them, the other person doesn't even know if the person behind the mask is white, black, or what ethnicity. They try on the masks and think they're great. They conclude that the equipment is excellent, and with this equipment, they can make it look like a robbery. One of them says, "I think we'll ultimately have to get very close to them, to make sure the job is done exactly. They're definitely dead. We need to get very close to them." Then they discuss the rifles, which one is better. Finally, they agree that an MP7, made in Germany, is the best. Wanbaki says that its work is guaranteed. Whatever is in its range, the trigger is pulled. They prepare everything in August, and this guy, Summers, and that Chinese guy, Lim, and the Colombians agree to test this crystal meth shipment they want to bring in. The test is like this. The same containers, the same route, the same people come, but instead of drugs, they put dried tea in them. It's very interesting that in the emails where they agree on the details of this operation, there's a detailed and extensive discussion about what kind of tea to use. It's almost like a Tarantino movie. In the end, the Colombians also say, "No, this is just a test and so on, and we'll choose this cheap tea and bring it." A little later, they bring the shipment and deliver it to Thailand, and from there, they put it on a ship and send it towards Liberia. A week or two later, the ship is still en route. Summers goes to Phuket, Thailand, and meets with these Colombians about Operation Alpha, this crystal meth operation. There he has a lot of photos. Photos from the port, photos of the shipment itself, a map of how they want to go to Liberia, and details of who, when, and where the ship will stop and where they will load. They also allocated an additional budget of $15,000 for this in case they need to bribe people. In an encrypted email, Summers explains to Le Roux that this is necessary because if something gets stuck and they need a political figure to get involved and help them, they can bribe them. They've also found their person. This person is the wife of the head of the Philippine Police Department. The agreement with the Colombians is that as soon as the shipment arrives in Thailand, they must send the money, which is about $6 million, to an account in Hong Kong. It's sent from the Philippines to a port in Thailand on a yacht, then transferred to a larger ship, and from there, it goes to Africa. In Thailand, Hunter and his team are meeting with the two Colombians to advance the assassination of that D agent and the informant. In late September 2013, the crystal meth shipment is ready to leave the Philippines, but this work never starts. Simultaneously with these arrests, thousands of kilometers away, Siberski and Filter are also arrested in their hotel in Tallinn, Estonia. 3 days later, the Department of Justice held a press conference in Manhattan and said that they had a covert operation in which they arrested Hunter and his team of assassins. Then he says, "My surprise increased when 2 months later, the D announced that they had arrested Summers and a company involved in that crystal meth deal." Then Ratliff says, "The more I started digging into these cases, the stranger things I saw, such as a strange person being referred to in both cases. Of course, no names of strange people were mentioned in either case. In one of the cases, he was referred to by the pseudonym Person Number 1. There was no informant, no D agent, no one in New York who wanted to buy 7 kilos of crystal meth from North Korea, and no cocaine was involved in the Bahamas. For example, they went and protected it like this. The house in Phuket was under police surveillance. Many of the meetings where the Colombians came, and Hunter thought he was searching them well and making sure they had nothing to record. The Colombians actually recorded all the emails they exchanged, all the plans they had. The D was collecting everything. In the interrogations of that case, they said, drug trafficking partner, something like that name. But it took us and the rest of the world several years to realize that Paul Le Roux, the person, they alternately feared greatly or admired greatly the person who had dragged all of them into this case, had actually been in police custody all this time, and not only had he been in police custody, but he had played the main role in this movie. They got caught in. And this podcast is simultaneously uploaded to Namlik, ME and Soundkari Cloud. You'll hear the last episode next Sunday. Introduce Channel NARRA to anyone you think enjoys new reports of real-life events. Follow the Channel NARRA podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Telegram with the handle Channel NARRA podcast to stay updated on new episodes and receive photos, documents, and marginal and supplementary materials about the master story and stories that have been told previously in the podcast. And he says it took him more than a year to realize that these important, mysterious figures in these two cases were actually one person. Within 6 months of these arrests, all 6 people who were in Thailand and the 2 who were in Estonia were transferred to New York City. Each member of Summers' team faced a case that states, yes, they conspired to import crystal meth into America. Hunter, Google, and Wanbaki are accused of conspiring to murder a law enforcement officer. Filter and Siberski as main charges are related to cocaine dealing in the Bahamas and the shipment they protected. As they await trial, during the time they are awaiting trial, what they are thinking about, in addition to the fact that a very long prison sentence awaits them, is what kind of game they were played. But probably the strangest and most shocking point for Hunter and Summers was something they realized as soon as they were arrested.